Hello, this is Jeff Johnston, the host of the Living Undeterred podcast. I'm really excited today. We have another individual that I happen to meet on social media, Elissa Tierney, and had a chance to look at her profile. And I'm impressed. I mean, the great thing about this journey I'm on is meeting some tremendous people that are awesome advocates. And we all have kind of an end game. We have the same passion, and that's to improve people's lives, yet at the same time, maintain our well-being as well. So, Elissa, it's great to meet you. Welcome to the Living Undeterred
Thank
podcast.
you, Jeff.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and kind of what got you to where you're at?
I'm from New Jersey, and I have been in recovery for almost a decade. And I've been in and out of treatment, over 20 treatment centers, which is kind of normal. A lot, like
Yeah.
almost everyone I know has been to like over 10. And then
Mm-hmm.
at one point, I was like, I'm not going to treatment. And my family was like, no, you have to go to treatment. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I could do it. So I'm like, how would I want to handle this? So unfortunately, I went to the hospital and I had to lie because I've been treated like so poorly before. So I told them I was
Right.
passing out. I hate lying. So I'm like,
You're not the first one to ever admit this on the show. I've had a number of people that say they had to get into help, so they had to make up some ailment.
because before I've been told go to treatment or I've been thrown into a
Right.
hallway. So I said I was passing out and they admitted me for 5 days. They said, your blood sugar is low. It keeps spiking down. They said your potassium's low. You have an infection. I was extremely dehydrated. So I was there for 5 days getting help. And I wanted to tell them so bad what was really happening, but I wanted to be treated like a human.
Mm-hmm.
So they let me go. I was like crying. I was like, please keep me. So then I went home and I prayed for like days. And I didn't want to get out of bed. I had no motivation. And then I decided, I'm like, I have to start reading about addiction. So
Right.
I wrote down everything that was upsetting me. So I'm like, all right, get off social media. Like at that moment, it was upsetting me. Like
Mm-hmm.
going through
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, seeing all my friends on vacation, seeing their kids. So I cut that out of my life right there. And then I started reading about how to increase dopamine naturally. So I had no energy to go to the gym, but that was on my list of things to do. And then I just started researching vitamins and I looked at my blood work from the hospital and I saw what I was deficient in. So I went and got
Mm-hmm.
vitamins for that. And then every day I would walk to the library and I would get another book about addiction and I would start reading what was going on. Why am I not motivated? What did I mess up in my brain? And then I started
Mm.
going from there. And then I started feeling better. And then I just couldn't stop reading because then I was like, I just needed to know more. Like
Right.
it's my addiction. So I should know what's going on and what did I mess up in my brain and how am I going to
Mm-hmm.
start feeling better? So I just started reading and then I needed to know what was going on with the doctors, I know my barriers, but I wanted to see what
Mm-hmm.
the other barriers were. Why aren't any of my friends getting better? So then I started looking back. I was in a recovery community for 4 years. And I was
Okay.
really involved in this recovery community. I lived in sober living, a bunch of houses, different girls. And I looked back at everybody that was in the community and I was like, who did well and who didn't? And then I was looking back and I'm like, everyone that did well, there wasn't a recipe to how they did well.
Right.
They found a purpose. Their life got
Right.
better in some aspect. So then I looked at that. And then I also saw that people were switching addictions and not even realizing it.
Mm.
And I had been doing that as
Right.
well. So I
Yeah.
noticed people were switching to quick dopamine fixes. So it was either a relationship, it was relationships, gambling, shopping, food. These were common
Right.
themes among everyone in the community. So I was looking at that. So I'm like, when I know, like in withdrawal, we talk about the physical symptoms a lot, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
talk about the mental. And a lot of the times I was
Right.
withdrawing, I'm like, I've had the flu before and I got through that. I'm like, and a lot of
Right.
people have had COVID. So I'm like, it's the physical paired with the mental because at that moment you have no dopamine and your brain is going to do anything to get dopamine at that moment. So you get a quick, the fastest way to get dopamine, everyone knows, is the substance.
Right.
So I was looking at that. So I just started like reading and seeing everyone's barriers and where I could help. So, I mean, right now I can't change policy and I can't change the
Right.
treatment model or regulations, but I found a way right now to like maybe change the stigma. So
You know, it seems to me that the ability for you to self-assess midstream like that, to be in rehab for so many times and then all of a sudden just kind of decide to take your inquisitive mind and say, I want to figure out why I am this way. And that makes you kind of an anomaly. Most people that struggle, they are not that interested to know the why. They just don't want to
yeah,
stop, because
yeah,
they don't. It's like I don't want to find out the truth because the truth then will reveal my weakness. And so I look at people in my life that they went to recovery. First of all, it wasn't voluntary. Both times, my son and my wife both went. It wasn't because they wanted to go; it was because they kind of had to
yeah.
go. And that mindset right there, if you're not open minded to getting better, then it's going to be hard. But were you always hardwired to be curious in things like that for you, or is that just something that just you finally realize if I don't do something, I'm going to die?
That's exactly what happened. And usually I hand my life over to someone who is trained and I just go with the flow. I do pretty I'm a really good student in rehab. I do whatever they tell me to. But at
Right.
this moment I'm like I've done this 20 times where I've given my
Wow,
life
that's
over to
amazing.
somebody and I don't think I ever really sat and thought about I mean I've heard like what part of your brain like the neurotransmitters and the dopamine and I've heard all that but I never really sat and thought about what was going on inside me and about addiction.
Right.
I never like so then once I started reading about it and seeing how I could fix my brain naturally, then I just couldn't stop reading. Then I had to know
Now, were
everything.
you sober during this time of trying to figure out what was going
Yeah,
on? Do you think that allowed you? Think the fact you were sober allowed you to be open to some of these things?
yeah.
Because if you had been under the influence, you probably wouldn't have went down any of
It
those
was
roads.
I when I like, got home from the hospital. I every day I woke up, I just didn't want to get out of my bed, and I didn't want to. I just kept praying. I'm like, please, like, keep me
Right.
motivated. But then once I realized that part of my brain right now isn't the reward center, the motivation isn't there.
Hmm.
I started looking at ways that I could increase dopamine. So then that's how I
Hmm.
started with that. And then day by day, then I got really invested because
So now
then
you're
I
not
wanted to read what the barriers are for
right.
addiction doctors. I know sometimes
Right.
with my counselors, I know they have to, a lot of their time they're writing notes to submit into insurance companies so you can get another day
Right.
in treatment. So I know I just wanted to see where I mean I've been passionate like this before. In 2016 I wrote to the White House. I was
Yeah.
only at 5 treatment centers at this point, but I just knew something was wrong. So I got a letter back from President Obama, but this was 2016. He was about to leave office. I'm shocked he even wrote back to me. But my I was saying that each hospital should have a detox unit because at that
Hmm.
point there weren't that many detoxes. So if you couldn't get in for 3 or 4 days, they told you to go to the hospital. Then when you go to the hospital, they say they can't help you. So
Right.
I do think as far as detox goes, I think there's a lot of other medical issues that are going on. A lot of people are so
Yeah.
dehydrated.
Yep.
There's so many things that I think I I personally think that the treatment model that we've been going on for years and the detox and the protocols need to change, but I can't do that right now. So,
Yeah. I have a couple questions. First of all, I love an addict. Where'd that come from? And I am wearing your
oh, you
bracelet, so thank you very much for. Yeah, I got them right here. Appreciate you sending them to me. I appreciate that.
um
But where'd that come from? That idea?
someone had sent me a link to a Facebook page with the wristband, and the girl's name was Avery, and my daughter's name is Avery. So they were like, "Is this you?" And I'm like, "No." So I read it, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I love this idea." For a couple of reasons. The girl's name is Avery, so that's close to my
Mm-hmm.
heart. And then I contacted the aunt and I said, "Hey, can I get involved in this? You know, I do PR and marketing." And she's like, "Oh, we don't really have a budget." And I'm like, "No, I want to do this for free. Like as long as I could be a part of the nonprofit side of it, I just
Right.
want, I'm like, I love this idea." And
Mm-hmm.
one of the other reasons I love this idea is because when I went to treatment, I lived with 11 girls in college at Rutgers, and they got a bracelet, and they sent me one, and they were all wearing it while I was in treatment, and the whole time I just kept looking at it. It was like it was one of the best gifts I ever got, knowing that I had support at home. And
It's a reminder. Yeah.
the whole time I was in treatment, I looked at that bracelet knowing that they were supporting me, and
Mm-hmm.
it was one of the things that got me through that. So that was the second reason why I love this idea. And then another reason why is because of, I think, Live Strong, those bracelets. I
Yeah.
I love that idea, and it also, not only did it help raise money, but it showed us all how cancer affects everyone. And I think that was
Right.
such an important message with those wristbands, was that addiction is affecting almost every family that I know. And
Every human on the planet.
exactly. And I think that countries that adopt the compassion and love for addicts,
Mm-hmm.
their addiction crises are shrinking over time. And instead of, I
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, I personally lived with shame, and we punish, stigmatize, and shame addiction. And I think we have to realize that the substance is just like a symptom of a deeper problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of people don't want to be present in their own lives. And that's something we need to work on, because, especially when I was in the recovery community, I noticed when someone's life got better in some aspect. Like one
Right.
of my friends left sober living after a month. It wasn't for her. Um, it was, a lot of the girls in the house at that time were negative. She didn't want to live there. Everyone told her, "You have to stay. You have to stay if you want a chance." She left, and she ended up starting a crystal business, and she got very
Mm.
into crystals,
Sure.
and that's her
Yep.
purpose. And she is doing so well in life because she found something that she loves, and
That's so important.
is something, exactly. And I think, and we were talking about the complete mental health package,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yep.
that is so important in.
Meaning and purpose,
Mhm.
having you know, f- uh, more than like spirituality, more than relationships, more than connectivity. It's like, you know, at some point, if you haven't figured out what your meaning and purpose is, there's that gaping hole. It's like, and then people fill that with alcohol or drugs or gambling or whatever addiction. But I want to go back to your days in rehab. Looking at your assessment now, why wasn't rehab successful for you for so long? I mean, what didn't it work for
um
you? I know everybody's different, but
I ask myself that all the time. I really do. I think every time, I think in the beginning, there was a point in my life that I started self medicating.
right,
And it happened to be, my marriage was toxic.
sure,
So I was going to treatment and learning all these great skills, and then going back into a toxic environment. So
right.
it didn't matter what I was learning at that moment. I was learning everything. I was going to so many treatment centers. I was going back into a toxic
An
environment.
environment, yeah,
So I think
yeah,
that is one of, aftercare is so important.
hmm.
It's such an important aspect.
Do they talk about that in rehab? I've never been in rehab. My wife was quite a bit, but do they talk about like my son was in prison, and that's kind of like rehab, and then you're released to society, kind of like rehab does.
Yeah.
And there isn't a very good bridge there to bridge my son, so he was gone within 60 days of being out of prison. So rehab, the recidivism rate is so high when people get out of rehab. they end up going back. You said like 20 times. I mean, that's not abnormal. 5, 6, 7, 8 times is probably the average at least.
Exactly. And sometimes I think if in those 30 days you worked at setting someone's resume up, getting them situated
Hmm.
for the life outside of the bubble of rehab.
The financial life too, what you have to do with your bills and stuff. Because most people in recovery are destitute financially. They're either in divorce stage, or they've been divorced, or they've blown all their money on drugs and alcohol. They don't have 50,000 in an IRA somewhere they can go tap.
No,
That's probably very common for people to get released from rehab, literally have no really place to go back to, because the people that really care for them probably aren't going to let them back
no,
in. I know I couldn't let my son back in the house, so I didn't want to enable him by allowing him back in.
yeah,
It's tough. It's really hard. I think there's a lot of similarities of people being released from rehab facilities and those that are incarcerated being released. And there needs to be a support system
yeah.
to get them kind of on their feet a little bit before they get thrown out there in the real world.
Definitely. When I was in the recovery community, I finally was like, all right, I'll go to sober living. So I went into sober living, and after a while, I started just noticing certain things. I said to the house manager, I'm like, these girls are so lost. I'm like, they don't know what they want to do with their lives. I'm like, their
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem is so low right now because,
I bet.
I mean, we've been told our whole entire lives, drugs are bad. If you do drugs, you're bad. And the shame and stigma attached to that. That's why I love the wristbands and what it stands for.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'm like, I found somebody who was going to come in and mentor them. And she said she was going to do it for free. She mentors women who start businesses. I told her our situation. I told her what was going on. I said, will you come in? So she's like, yeah, I'll come in for free. So I told the house manager. She went and told the owners of the company, and they didn't want to do it. And I got so upset about it. And I talked to my sponsor who works on the insurance side of the company. And she was like, Elissa, that's not going to make them money. This is a business. And I just took that so personally. I was so upset. I'm like, my
Mm-hmm.
friends' lives are not a business. Like, I know that it is a business. I know rehabs are a business, but at the same time, aftercare, you need to set up a support, empower these girls. Some of them don't even know what they want to do with their life. I always feel like I
Right.
feel like for women, there's two options. Well, at least in my community, it was either you were going to be a waitress or go back into the recovery community. If you were a guy, you go to
Hmm.
construction or back into the recovery community and into treatment.
Right.
And I'm like, you only
Right.
really have a couple options. I'm like, that's why I think finding your purpose or finding what you want to do with your life is so important in aftercare. And just,
There's a balancing act. It's like you can have meaning and purpose, but if you can't make your car payment, that's stressful.
yeah,
Or if you look in the mirror and you feel like you're 50 pounds overweight. That's why I talked about earlier about the projects we're working on to try to put this planning service together so people could look at the components of a good mental health, which would be your physical nature, your financial,
so
your
important.
spiritual, which is your connection to whatever you're connected to, and then the fourth element, which kind of just sits out there, people forget about, is your meaning and purpose. So it's hard. It's very difficult because I just keep thinking of my wife when I picked her up at that facility. You know, I didn't have to go to rehab. I just quit cold turkey one time and never drank again.
Mhm.
And this is 30 something years of being an alcoholic. So I couldn't relate to what my wife was going through because I didn't struggle. And that was a naive approach as a husband, because now later on she's gone. I look back now at all those moments I had to really be more understanding. But I wasn't. I was your typical spouse that was kind of mad. I'm like,
It's
why are you
so
doing this?
hard.
Why are you doing this to destroy our family? Why? And so now in hindsight, I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, I certainly missed some opportunities where and I'm not trying to, you know, ask for forgiveness and all this stuff, but it's like, I look for lessons. So in my life, when something happens and I don't torture myself with, I should have been a better husband, or why, what if. I think to myself, what can I learn from this event? I can't bring Seth and Prudence back, and you can't bring loved ones back either. But that shouldn't prohibit us from honoring them in the way we live,
Yeah.
you know? And so for me, whenever which is very rarely, I mean, since I've been sober, I probably, I'm not lying, I haven't had one urge to drink.
Yeah.
But I mean, what I mean urge is I never looked at a beer or a glass of wine going, I mean, I'll just have a half a glass. I mean, that would be an urge. I look at it and I'm going like, F you. You know, it's like you took some important people in my life and I'm not going to contribute to you.
Yeah.
So for me, it's an adversarial relationship with alcohol where I hate it. I'm not afraid of drinking and going back into being an alcoholic. I'm not worried about that at all. As a matter of fact, I know fairly certain I could have a drink and I wouldn't even convince myself I broke some streak because I don't keep score.
Yeah.
I just know when I quit. I know the day I quit. I don't know how many days it is in between, but
I saw.
I just kind of realized, you know what? I don't want to have the same, you know, me versus them. I'm in this torturous battle. I'm in this sobriety battle. It's like, for me, I didn't want to play that narrative. Now, again, watching my wife really struggle drinking, I have a lot of sympathy, a lot of pity, a lot of empathy, a lot of compassion, all those emotions for those people that are in the grips of specifically alcohol abuse. And my heart goes out to them. I wish everybody had the ability just to quit cold turkey.
Yeah.
It'd be great. But for those that can't, what support systems can we provide as a society? What bridges can we give them when they are going from, you know, stage to stage in their own sober life or quest to be sober? And if they fall back, what's there to protect them, you know? And to say I'm disenfranchised with the whole recovery space would be probably an understatement. I'm very frustrated with the inability for our society to try to show people there are better ways to live their lives than to live it in pain and suffering and torture all the time.
I know.
And I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know. I'm still looking.
Yeah.
Why I do the podcast. I mean, I don't know.
I've been to great treatment centers and I've been to ones that like everyone kept telling me go to Florida. Like my family was convinced that if I went to Florida, it was going to save me. So I finally, to appease everyone in my life, I went to Florida. I went to Florida because I'm like, all right, this is the epicenter of recovery, and it was a really bad experience for me. Like people were calling me trying to convince me to go to their center and saying not to go to the one that I went to. And I was so confused and I was so sick and I was so at the lowest point of my life. And
you just wanted help. And
then
and people were like bidding war over you, trying to get.
It was a bidding war over me. And I'm like, it was not a good experience for me at all. And I thought like the better insurance I had, the more opportunities I would have to get better treatment. But it kind of made me a bigger target. Sometimes, not all the time, but the place that I did go down to in Atlantic City, the program itself is amazing. It's a holistic center, and you eat organically every day. You work out after you go into treatment. The beginning morning is all group therapy, and then in the afternoons you always do something either artistic. You go to they have a farm. And it's a great program. It was just the aftercare program. You kind of just get thrown. So for 30 days, you're built up, you're working out, you're eating organically, you're cooking. Great program. And then everyone gets sent to sober living with a $1,500 balance right when you walk in the door. And I just started noticing like no one has the means to go join a gym right away or eat organically. So I was trying to like find ways that we could create, you know, healthy environment where we were living. So that's one of the, you know, things I would like to, you know, work on. But right now there's so much I can do. So right now I could just change the stigma. I mean, we keep saying change the stigma. And I know a lot of people will say, well, we're trying to say substance use disorder, which I love. I just couldn't.
I don't use
fit it on the wristband.
I don't use that. I came up with my own term because I don't like the word disorder.
I know.
it's a defeating word. It's a label.
And then we're going, and
It's
then
like
we're
this.
blaming it on
It's
the
like this.
substance again.
We're trying to
But
change stigma, and we change words, and we add disorder.
yeah,
So here's what I do. I just call it substance use distress.
yeah. I mean,
I just and distress is like you're waving your hand. You're just distress. A disorder sounds like it's an abnormality, like you're it's like a demon attached to the back of you, and it's embedded in you. It's a disorder. It's something we can extract. If I just say it's distress, it's substance use distress. I think to me that's a lot more applicable to what people go through when they battle substance use. Um, I just I don't even like a disorder with attention deficit. I don't like putting disorder on
I
words that
know.
you know what addiction is, you know what depression is, you know what anxiety is, you know what um uh all it is just makes us human.
Exactly.
What's abnormal with everything I just said? You know what it is? It's a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us have a really high levels of attention deficit, like myself, and
Mm-hmm.
some have really low. But we all have I mean, to say one kid has attention deficit and you don't,
I know.
that right there starts segregating. You start saying there's the affected and the non-infected, the ones with the virus, the ones without. And you start playing that game where you're starting to separate. And you do this with kids. So kids go to school thinking, I have a disorder. All my friends don't, because first of all, no one told them they have a disorder, so they can't have one. But I'm taking a pill called Adderall and they're not. So I'm effed up. I'm the problem child. I'm the one that everyone talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a mindset. It's like, why can't I had a lady one time that reached out to me, and everyone that watches my podcast has heard this story, so they're probably going to turn it off and listen to Joe Rogan now. But the reality is, I had a lady reach out to me one time on Facebook, and she said, Jeff, I love what you're doing, but I'm really struggling. My daughter died. She took her life, and I have survivor's guilt. I went to see a therapist, and I have survivor's guilt, and I feel like, she did it because of me, and I should be gone, not her. What do you think I should do? And I'm just a dad from Iowa, man. I'm not that smart. I'm not a clinician. I don't have any medical background. The closest thing I'm to a doctor is my dad's a doctor. That's as close as I get to being a doctor. And so I thought to myself, well, I'm going to give her an honest answer. So I said, how about this? I said, for the next week, tell yourself you have survivor opportunities,
Okay.
not survivor guilt. Because somebody anointed you that word, and I don't know who gave power. Who did you give power to have them tell you that you have a disorder or you have a problem when you're human?
Mm-hmm.
Guilt is a human. Shame, all these are human emotions. We want to act like people are freaking cyborgs, and those that some of us have these emotions, some don't. We all have depression. We all have all these things. So she got back with me a week later and said, I'm amazed how once I thought to myself, I have survivor opportunity. So I could write a book. That's a survivor opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I could go on a podcast. That's a survivor opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Get this damn word guilt out of your vocabulary because it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
You're human.
Yeah.
We all have survivor's guilt. We all have trauma. We all have depression.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us have found ways to just don't participate. I jokingly say, I tried depression a few times. I didn't like it, so I quit.
Yeah.
But I'm almost serious.
Yeah.
That's my mindset. I don't want to be depressed, so I don't go there.
And I was saying, I'm like, I think as humans, we want kids to behave a certain way. We want adults to behave a certain way. And then when they don't, we want to medicate them. We want a quick,
or put them in a box, right?
Fast. Because my dad, my parents came here from Ireland, and my dad worked when I was little 7 days a week, which I thought was normal, but I didn't realize every dad doesn't work 7 days a week. So then he retired, and we were so excited because we're like, Dad, now you can golf all the time. And we were so excited for him to retire because he worked so hard his whole life. And then he was depressed, and we didn't even put it together that now he doesn't have a purpose every day. He's not going to work every day.
Right, exactly.
So we didn't know what to do.
Right.
We were like, Dad, you need to see a doctor. We need to medicate him. Like, this is so weird. Like, we didn't know what to do.
Medicate him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a natural reaction.
And then my dad was on a medication for the side effects for that medication. And by the end, I think he took something to sleep, to wake up. It was like
Yeah,
ridiculous. And I think we're
it's
so quick
insane.
to, I'm not saying in any way that medication sometimes isn't needed, but it doesn't have to be the first thing. I think we,
Especially with our kids,
especially, I had
especially
ADHD.
with our kids.
Yeah, that wasn't even an option for my parents.
We all
They
did.
put me
My
in
dad would just
sports.
say, "Go out in the woods and fight your brothers. Get some sticks and go play cowboys and Indians." I mean, or go get in your bikes and jump over trash cans. I mean, that's what you did in the
Yeah,
'70s, growing up in the '80s. And it's like, today it's like, kids are just watching
I
videos. They're
know.
like you said, they're on TikTok, seeing the Kardashians
I
and seeing
know.
people, seeing 21-year-old YouTubers making 40 million a year, and they're like, "Why aren't I a 21-year-old YouTuber?" Well, because you're not,
I know.
and they're not making
My
$20 million.
daughter. So I have twins, boy and a girl, and when they were little, I remember Avery wanted to be a vet, and Logan wanted to be a fireman. So I'm like,
Of course, we all did.
when
Yeah.
you're little, you want to help people. That's what you want to do when you're little. And now my son wants to be a
Mm-hmm.
famous soccer player, and my daughter just told me she wants a YouTube channel to host it. So I'm like, it's just
Yeah.
crazy how they get a little bit older, and like our definition of success is a certain thing. Like success has to be a big
Right.
house, nice things. It's always
Right.
things. So I'm like, I think if we change the definition of success, maybe it's just helping someone. And I think
Yeah.
as like a society, like so if you go to the website iloveanaddict.org, this girl is
Mm-hmm.
like she's basically my boss. I have a 8-year-old CEO. Actually, she's going to be 9 on Halloween. And
Oh,
she's
cool.
so sweet. She's so sweet. And her idea is so simple. She is basically like, well, if celebrities and everyone wears these wristbands, then people won't think that my mom is a bad person. And I love that idea. Especially like
Mm-hmm.
she's so young. She doesn't even understand that when like celebrities embrace something in society, like it catches on, and we all do.
Oh, yeah.
And countries that we don't even have to try this out in another country. Countries that have
Mm-hmm.
adopted this idea of compassion and love to addicts and putting all their resources in bettering their lives, like Portugal and
Mm-hmm.
Switzerland. It's a success. We don't even have to test it out. Like, it is a
Right.
success when you show compassion and love towards addicts, and we take away the stigma and the shame. We don't have that in any other disease. Like, you wouldn't think twice about wearing a pink uh Save the Tata shirt. Like, you wouldn't think twice
Mm-hmm.
about it, but I'm sure, like, and I
Mm-hmm.
know because I like the word addict. It's just
Yeah.
for a while,
Yeah. I
for
mean,
a
there's a
while,
lot to
I
do
hid
with
it.
label.
I mean,
Yeah, with labels and stigmas have just been the inability for us to get past. Like you said, I mean, you take a person who say was eating really poor foods, and they develop diabetes, or they develop something disease related that's primarily based on their food, not their genetics.
yeah,
And the outpouring of support, the GoFundMe's, the fundraisers, trying to help this person. Then you get someone the same age bracket that gets in a car accident because they were drunk, or does a felony or something because they were high, or they develop let's say they get AIDS or something from intravenous drug use with needles. It's like, they kind of deserved it. It's
yeah,
like, well, but they don't understand that the reason they got in that car and they drove is because they have an addiction problem and they couldn't say no. Just like the person eating pizza couldn't say no, and now they're 100 pounds overweight and they're diabetic. It's like, but they get sympathy, they get empathy, but the person who's battling addiction and substance abuse just gets the scourge of society. It's like, well, they kind of. I'm sure there are people, when you see an overdose, I'm sure there are people who say, well, they had to know, they had to know when they were doing these things that this could happen. And why couldn't they just have seen? Well, it's not that freaking simple.
no,
It's not that simple.
exactly,
When you eat dessert,
yeah,
that it could affect your cholesterol. 82% of all adult medical issues could be self-regulated through diet and exercise.
I know. That's what I
So
was saying.
82% of adults that bitch and moan about what they have wrong with them, and their ailments, they're getting knee
Yeah,
replacements and back surgeries and all this stuff, because there's a high probability it's their lifestyle. but we don't look down on them. We feel sorry for them. Actually, we want to help them.
Yep.
Why can't we do that with people that are battling drug addictions and substance abuse and alcoholism? Why can't we have the same compassion and care for them as a society instead of looking at them as, oh, it's a choice. They chose to do that,
I know.
and some do. And like me, I chose to quit, but a lot of people can't.
Yeah. And I think if you want to be present in your life, I then you're basically, we're getting mad at people for self-medicating out of failed mental health system. So we're getting mad
Yeah.
at people, and then that's what it is. Everyone's self-medicating because they don't want to be present in their own lives. So
Yeah, that's so true.
we need to make sure people want to be present. And right now with fentanyl, it's it's
It changed
changed the
everything.
game. It
It
changed
changed
the
mid game. It took the goalpost and just slid them across the field during the game. So, yeah, fentanyl.
ugh,
Um, I didn't know what fentanyl was the day my son died. Never heard of the word. I knew
yep,
heroin. Who doesn't know what heroin is?
yeah,
And then when I saw the death certificate, the fentanyl, I'm like, well, what's fentanyl? And then all of a sudden I started being aware. It's like if someone said, think of a pink car, that's fine. But then all of a sudden that next day you're going to see pink
yep,
cars because now you're thinking about them.
mm-hmm,
Well, fentanyl the same way. Once I learned about fentanyl, now it's everywhere. All these people are dying. And so I looked at the numbers and I'm like, and it went from 46,000 years Seth died to 108 last year. But we all know more about what fentanyl is, but the deaths keep going up. And that's what has me the most, that has my most concern out there, Elissa, is this raising awareness campaign isn't working.
no,
It hasn't
no,
worked. Raising awareness in certain areas, maybe breast cancer,
yeah,
things like that, it's worked. But when it comes to addiction and especially fentanyl, it ain't working. So
yeah,
I think we got to take an approach where we're bringing attention to these issues, and it's a whole different psychological mindset.
yeah,
Raising awareness is a little bit more in your face.
mm,
Posters of my deceased child, walks over at the White House, banging, saying, Biden caused these deaths. I mean, that's raising
mm-hmm,
awareness, but that doesn't work.
yeah,
It has never worked, and it doesn't work. It just creates a culture of angry people blaming
exactly,
each other.
yeah. And then
But
scaring our
bringing attention
kids,
to
like we're just,
I think bringing attention to is a more positive cultural way we can talk about these things and really create a shift in the mindset of how people are approaching these things by kind of luring people in with compelling
yeah,
stories. So a podcast like this show allows you to kind of talk about your unique situation. I inject mine, we share.
yeah,
People watching this can relate to it, and they're not going to walk away all mad.
mhm,
And that's what raising awareness does. It creates anger. It's in your face. And I think as a advocate for mental health, we need to just kind of put raising awareness in a box and just put it away. And now we focus on bringing attention to,
mhm,
you know, there's a reason why my RV around the country didn't have the face of my son and my wife on it. That's raising awareness.
yeah,
I wanted to bring attention to, so I called it the mental health magnet, living undeterred. It creates conversation. If I drive around the country with my son's face on there with a needle picture, people are going to be turned off by that.
mhm,
It's like my youngest son who's gay. I said, Roman, because he wants to be an advocate for LGBTQ rights and all that. And I said, it's awesome. I love you for
yeah,
that, but bring attention to this. Don't raise awareness.
yeah,
What are you raising awareness for?
mhm,
Shoving all this in people, that's not going to work.
yep,
What you want to do is just be the best gay man you can be an advocate for gay rights, get involved,
mhm,
promote love, promote empathy, compassion, and you'll raise awareness just by bringing attention to it.
yep, exactly.
You know,
Like I never, in a million years thought this was going to be my life. My life was going exactly
right?
as planned. I
Yep.
drugs were around me in college and high school. I just didn't. I was afraid.
Mostly pot.
Like everything was around me. I mean,
Yeah.
ecstasy was like big back then. I didn't do it. I
Right.
liked my life. My life was going exactly as I had planned it. I played sports. I was good at sports. I got good grades. I was at Rutgers. had a journalism degree. I got a great job right
Hmm.
after that. I started working at NFL Films. Like
That's right.
everything was going as planned. I didn't need to seek out anything at that time, and I didn't think my life was
Hmm.
going in this direction. And I think I mean, I know that back then, I think when I thought of addiction, I'm like, well, if I lost my house and I was living on the streets, I'd stop using that substance. That's how I thought of this.
Right.
That is
Me
exactly how I
too.
thought of this. I did not
Yeah.
think farther than that. I just thought if this is causing so many problems in your life, then you should probably stop drinking or doing that. I was naive back then. I did not
I
think
think we
my
all
life
are. And,
was
and, and you just don't wake up an addict either. You don't wake up an alcoholic. It's insidious. It's just, I look back at every person I know that now is in recovery and they're sober. And I was around a lot of these people when we all started drinking together too,
going.
early on in 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th grade. And it just sneaks up on you. All of a sudden you're 35
I
and you're like,
know.
wow, I didn't realize I drink 6 days a week. I
Mhm.
didn't realize it. And that's the insidious nature of addiction. Is it just, you don't wake up an addict. You
No.
don't just get up and all of a sudden you're an
Yep.
alcoholic. Let me ask you a question before we end the
Okay.
show. Where does like trauma come into play? Like childhood trauma, and Dr. Gabor Mate is a big advocate of all addiction stems from childhood trauma. And then before we leave, I do want to talk a little bit about Dr. Arun Gupta, who
Um,
we both know.
love it.
But I'd like to end with talking about that a little bit. But let's talk about trauma. What's your thoughts on how that works with addiction?
See, with I
Easy question, right?
yeah. So I had a great childhood. My parents
I did
I
too.
had such a happy, great, wonderful childhood. And then sometimes in treatment, they were like, well, was it really that happy? And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah,
What are you
I'm like,
forgetting?
I'm pretty sure. And then like they would try and actually
Yep.
get me to remember something traumatic. And I'm like, nothing happened. And they're like, well,
And that's
they were
terrible.
like,
They were trying to do
they were like,
that.
because your parents didn't fight is because and now that you expect no one to fight. Like they were trying to make me think that something was wrong, which
Wow.
is not always it's not always the
That's their
case.
job though, but that's their job.
Yeah, so that's what came with that. But and then I always think that I think detox should be more medical. I think people should be
Hmm.
getting IVs and their underlying issues. I mean, when you go to detox, you see a doctor for 5 minutes, you get set on a taper depending on what you're coming in for, and then you taper down and then you go to treatment. And then you're sick half of the time in treatment. So I feel
Hmm.
like if detox was more medical and you were getting IVs and you were treating the underlying issues and you were actually starting to fix what's going on up here, and then by the time you got to
Hmm.
treatment you start learning, wait, you instead of getting the quick fixes like a relationship, and detox and treatment
Hmm.
is crazy. People are always getting into relationships and you're just like, what is happening? Like, what? So instead of that, I'm like, I feel like in treatment it should be 30 days of setting up. You should have a life coach or a case manager or social worker along with that. And then I think aftercare is where you can start getting into the trauma. And then by that point, you can start
Yeah, that
talking
makes
about
sense.
that stuff. Because I don't think
That
you're,
makes
I mean,
sense.
if you're half the when you get to treatment you're usually so sick and you're so tired
Hmm.
because your blood sugar is so off balance that it takes like 2 weeks into treatment, which is only 30 days. 2 weeks into
Hmm.
treatment you start to feel better and you're starting to retain information. Like I love Ryan Hampton too, and I love how he kind of compares sometimes to cancer, because if you think about it, what if you took everyone with cancer, you put them into treatment where you just talk about your hair falling out and how sick you feel and how you could
Hmm.
stop cancer from spreading. And you're not actually like, there's no medical part really of treatment. You're just kind of
Right.
talking. So I think like
Right.
aftercare is where you get into like the trauma and things that happen
Yeah, that makes sense.
and that stuff. So
Where do you think some of the new alternative ways of looking at mental health, and specifically things like TMS and MERT technology, which would be your
Yep.
brainwave technology, and then you couple that with ketamine and
Hmm.
psilocybin and psychedelics, which have really isn't new. I mean, the brainwave technology is new, but
Hmm.
not the psychedelics. They've been around thousands of
Yeah.
years. Indigenous people have been using them for a long time. So plant-based medicine's not going to go away. It's been here. It's
Hmm.
part of the earth. What's your thoughts on these now? Again,
That's,
you start talking about a psychedelic drug, they people get like, well, why would you do a drug to get off drugs? It's
you
like,
know,
well, MAT, I mean,
yeah, they did.
methadone is
That's
that's what we're doing with methadone.
because I'm reading so much about this. That's how they started treating people before prohibition. Like when that's how they were treating people. They were getting people off their substances by tapering them off with the substance. But now when I look into the the low dose ketamine treatments and all that stuff, they're fixing the neurotransmitters in your brain, which have been so destroyed from your use.
Mm,
So I actually was looking into that,
mm-hmm,
and NAD, I started taking that because that NAD also does that.
what's that?
NAD is a vitamin, and you could do like IV vitamins.
Oh, okay.
So NAD is, I think that's how like
Okay.
Justin Bieber got clean. I just read that. But NAD, no, but yeah, NAD does work. So, I mean, I can't really afford right now the vitamin treatments, but I've been taking the vitamin NAD and I've been noticing such a change. So that does the same kind of thing that the low dose ketamine is doing. It's fixing that part of your brain, impulse and your reward center. So it's fixing that for you. So I mean, right now, I think we need to look at, it can't be so black and white. Like you go to detox, you taper, you go to treatment,
Yeah.
but
Everything's on the
this
table.
is how, and then
Everything's on the
you do
table.
this, this, and this, and that's how you recover. And if you don't do that, then it's your fault. No, like we
Yep.
have to look at all these options. Um, anything that,
We're past the patients. We're past all this.
like yeah, exactly.
I mean, we're at desperate stages right now as a
There's,
society. We have to look at every possible alternative from, like I said, psychedelics, brainwave technology, exercise, diet, meditation,
yeah,
audiovisual stimulation, things. Everything's on the table because if you and I could sit here and say, well, got great news. Depression's getting better, suicidal ideation's better, the suicides are down, overdoses are down, alcohol deaths are down. People aren't vaping. Kids in high schools aren't vaping much anymore. Marijuana use is dropping. Wow, that's great. Everything's working. Problem is, nothing's working. Every statistic's worse just about than it was 5-10 years
I
ago.
know, and
So if we just keep adding more therapists, keep building more rehab facilities, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
thank you. Thank you very much. I've been saying that. I'm like, I don't know where the money, I don't know where the money in each state's going towards. And I know like
Yeah, I don't
to
either.
create more treatment centers, but if the treatment, if a certain type of cancer treatment wasn't working and people were dying, we would look at the treatment, wouldn't we? We would look at the treatment and we would
Right, right,
revamp the treatment of that. So
right,
I think we really do need
right.
to look at the 30-day model and re- rethink that and think like, how do we fix what's
Yeah,
going on in your brain? Because if you have no impulse control, I don't care what techniques you're teaching me and what breathing techniques I'm
right,
getting, it goes out the
right,
window
right.
if I'm not fixing the
Well,
reward center.
especially for kids.
I know. And this,
I mean, you got the prefrontal cortex isn't formed by 25, so you're talking to 18-year-olds about impulse control, and they're under the influence, and their prefrontal cortex isn't even close to being fully
I
developed.
know.
That's why they don't have impulse control. That's why teenagers make rash decisions and they think it's the right decision at the time, or
Exactly.
they don't even think about consequences. All right, so before we leave, let's talk about Dr.
Oh,
Gupta
love
because he's
him.
a good personal friend. I'm honored to be on the Rotary board with him. I read his book. I've had him a guest on
It's
my
so
podcast, so
great.
I know you kind of became enamored with some of his work. Why
Yeah.
don't you tell me a little bit about what you've learned from him?
Well, I wanted to read his book because I want to know what everyone's barriers are, like why certain things can't happen. So I when I after I read his book, I'm like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know all these regulations were happening, especially with prescribing
Mm-hmm.
Suboxone. Um, your first year, you can only have like
Mm-hmm.
38 patients, and I'm like, if it's easier to prescribe an
Yeah.
opioid than it is for the cure, then something is not right. And then in his book, he goes on to say there's no
Mm-hmm.
incentives for people to want to go into the addiction field, and that is so sad. That's so sad. We don't have enough doctors
Yeah,
right
it is sad. Plus, even not just financially, but just the mental strain it causes. I know you know this too. I know a lot of mental health advocates that I meet that when I talk to them, late at night on their phone, they call me and we're having talks. They break down. They're like, I don't feel like I'm making a difference. I don't get paid enough. I just my own life is a wreck, and that's sad when you see the industry and physicians are like that when they came down with all these restrictions and all these hoops they had to jump through. The quality of life of a physician had to drop immensely. So you had a lot less young physicians coming into the business, many retiring early, getting out. And Dr. Gupta's book, The Preventable Epidemic, is a
it's
must
so
read.
good.
Um, and I'm very honored to have a chance to work with him on the Rotary
We need more
International
doctors like
Action
him.
Group committee. I know he's so passionate about
I
helping
know.
people. That's what I really like about him. And
And he
again, it's
sees
the
us as
Preventable Epidemic.
humans.
You and I both read it.
Yeah. And he sees
Yeah,
he sees past the addiction, and I think that's what everyone suffering from this wants to be seen as. We want people. I feel like the wristband says I love an addict, but I feel like it means like we love you, we value you, and we're on your side. Like that's all we want as like patients. We
right.
want you we want like people in the ER to see us as we want everyone to see us as people. We're humans. We're like your brothers, sisters, neighbors, daughters, moms. Like that we're more than that.
What
Oh, that's what I wanted to say about the
your shirt could say,
I love them.
your shirt could just simply say, "I love everybody," because everybody's an
I
addict.
know. And that's
You
another thing
know, we're all addicts.
when I was talking to Avery's family about the wristbands, I said, the way I wanted to package the wristbands, I said, I want every wristband to represent like someone that we lost because I get really upset like when
Mm-hmm.
my friends are just a Facebook post for a week because they're, there's so much more than that. They're like, so I wanted people to, if they want to send in like a picture of their loved one and like how they lived, what they were like what my
Mm-hmm.
friend Sasha, I think that's the one I
Mm-hmm.
sent you. She was my closest friend that I lost, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got that.
she was so
I
artistic.
have that right here.
And she decided she wanted to be a tattoo artist, and she had just got into college too, which just hurts me so much because
Mm-hmm.
she left my
How old was
she
she?
was 27 and she wasn't I was living in
Wow.
sober living and I didn't want her to be alone in a hotel, so I said you could come
Mm-hmm.
stay with me. And she said I have to go to school tomorrow, and I said you're not, I know what you're doing. And she's like I'm not gonna die, like I
Mm-hmm.
promise. I'm like you can't promise me that, like you can't promise me that. And she never came back.
Right. With
And
fentanyl now,
it
yeah.
happened, and she,
Was it fentanyl?
yeah, her phone was off, and then everyone was like, well, she probably sold her phone. And I'm like, no, I was getting worried. And then after like a couple of days, everyone was getting worried. And everyone
Hmm.
started, and my sponsor, who was also her sponsor, started calling around to the hospitals and the morgues. And she described her, and they were like, we've had her for a couple of days. And she went into a place in Atlantic City, and I
Hmm.
don't know who she was with. I don't know what happened. Like no one knows the full story, but she didn't come out of that apartment, and I know
Hmm.
she didn't want to die. She just got into college. I know she didn't want to
Right.
die, and that's what's happening. Like all these statistics,
Yeah.
a name and someone is behind every overdose. Like a person, like an amazing
Right.
person, and that's what I want people to realize.
Right.
So if I wanted people to if anyone wants to send it to me, it's I Heart an Addict, or you can see it on iloveanaddict.org. If you want to send me a picture, and every wristband can represent somebody that we lost, because we're losing people every day. And
Hmm.
I don't know what to do because I have to do something because and what I can
Well,
do is try to change the signal.
you do know you are doing something. You are doing something, and that's all you can do. And I think each one of us individually probably aren't moving the needle a lot, but as a collective group of
Exactly.
advocates, I think we can make massive changes. Well, how do people reach you? What's the best way to contact you if someone has questions and follow up from the show?
Um, I get you can go to iloveanaddict.org, and then if you want to contact me, it'll go to me. It's that's iheartanaddict at gmail. That'll be on it. So if you just go to the iloveanaddict.org, uh, if you contact that page, you will be contacting me. Oh, and then Avery wanted me to say that
Okay.
she wanted to do a get she wants the proceeds to this obviously to help addicts, and we were going to scholarship detox beds, but she has a celebrity wish list for the wristbands, and then she wanted to do a dance
Ah,
marathon and have all the performers be people in recovery. So so all the perform
that'd be great.
yeah, so she's, oh my god, she's an angel. We should all think like children. They're so like,
How old is she?
she's going to be 9 on Halloween. She's so sweet.
It's great to be that
She's
age
so,
and be
and
a
it's
big thinker because as you get older, you tend not to think big.
I know. And it glows in the dark, her wristband. She designed it.
I'll find that out here in a minute. Well, listen, I enjoyed talking
Oh,
to you
Jeff,
again.
thank you so much.
I admire what you're doing, and yeah, we have a lot of work ahead of us. We have never-ending work ahead of us because I think it'd be nice to envision a world where there was no addiction and substance use distress, but the reality is that that's a world I probably won't be alive to see,
I know.
unfortunately.
I just want the next generation. If I can make it better for them, my kids, when I look at them, I
Yeah.
want to make it, like you said, the whole mental health package where my kids don't have to look
Hmm.
to substances to self-medicate, but if they do, I want them to know that I love them and I support them, and that it's
Right.
not a determining factor of your life. You can get through it. It's hard, but you can get through it, you know? So that's what I
You
just
have to. You have to get through it
yeah,
because,
and there's many different ways
well,
to.
listen, I really honored to have you on the show.
Thank you, Jeff.
Appreciate your advocacy and your passion, and our paths will cross many
I
times, so I'm not
know.
worried
I'm
about
so
that. But
happy I met you.
again,
You're
honored to have
amazing.
you on the show. Yeah, this was a good conversation. I like the podcast because I just get to meet some really neat people, and I learn something every episode. That's the beauty of doing a podcast, and actually being on podcast is enjoyable as well. If I can walk away and just have a few nuggets of wisdom I can steal from my guests, then I selfishly benefit as well.
Yeah, you're great. I'm
Well,
so
listen, thanks for
happy.
your time, and well, I appreciate all your support. Okay,
Thank you so much, Jeff.
thank you very much.